Good morning, it's January 13th, and this is To My Liberal Friends. Last week, there was a momentous decision and announcement, both coming from Chairman of Meta, Mark Zuckerberg. First, he announced that he was doing away with third-party fact-checking on Facebook. Second, on the Joe Rogan podcast, he let it be known that he was under great pressure from the Biden administration to censor certain points of view, particularly those that went counter to what was being put out by the White House. And of course, those on the left immediately reacted and denounced this decision to do away with fact checkers. Andrew Schrockman, the executive director of PolitiFact, ripped into Zuckerberg. He was outraged that Facebook would make this decision. For years, Meta's platform, Facebook and Instagram, have employed PolitiFact to fact check and provide context to posts in those mediums. What Mr. Schrockman does not seem to admit or even realize is that the consensus is that his organization is biased and leans strongly to the left. Now, according to the website All Sides, which is neutral on this, and it monitors media and so-called fact-checking organizations, PolitiFact is biased in ways that align with liberal, progressive, or left-wing thought and or policy agendas. That same site had this to say in 2021, quoting them, PolitiFact issued a fact check with the headline, Biden-Harris distrusted Trump with COVID-19 vaccines, not the vaccine themselves, end quote. The piece argued that videos of President Joe Biden and Kamala Harris expresses skepticism, hesitancy about a COVID-19 vaccine should it be developed under Trump. It did not constitute general vaccine hesitancy, but rather distrust of Trump. Well, this fact check constitutes an interpretation of Biden and Harris remarks, not a fact check. And that's what All Sides pointed out. A fact check would have simply included the quotes from Biden and Harris and allowed readers to interpret the meaning for themselves. Wow, let us figure it out ourselves. PolitiFact, May of 21, amid calls for a deeper investigation into the theory of COVID-19, had stated that it started out with a laboratory week in Wuhan, China, removed a fact check from its database and referred to this theory as, quote, a debunked conspiracy theory. That's according to them, but a lot of people think it did start in Wuhan. But PolitiFact is not alone in their complaining. Other sites are complaining as well, and it should be noted that many of them are populated by former CNN employees. Alan Duke, a former CNN journalist who now runs the fact-checking site Lead Stories, said his firm was blindsided by Meta's announcement and by Zuckerberg's accusation about bias. Of course, those doing the fact-checking never think they're biased. They simply assume that their opinions on subjects are the correct ones, and anyone posting something counter to their thinking must be wrong and subject to having that context fact-checked by them and allowing them to show the reading public how wrong the original post was. What Zuckerberg has done is return to the principle of free speech in his platforms. He's saying that the readers can make their own decisions and read the material on what to believe and what not to believe. What a novel concept. But to those on the left, they view this as capitulating to Donald Trump and are outraged that they would no longer be the arbiters of what is true and what is false. Now, I will agree with them that I think Zuckerberg is kissing up to Donald Trump. And if he's making these accusations, he ought to give a little more detail. It's amusing that these fact checkers never said a word about Democrats repeatedly saying that Joe Biden was on top of his game, that he was mentally sharp as a tack and in full control of all decisions at the White House. It took the American public to witness the problems with Biden when he faltered so badly in the debate that took place last June. And now we read stories that as early as 2021, his first year in office, he would have good days and bad days, and meetings had to be scheduled accordingly. We can all remember the so-called fact-checkers were denouncing stories about Hunter Biden's laptop and buying into the 51 former intelligence officers who said it was Russian disinformation. Where were those fact-checkers then? I can tell you they were busy fact-checking conservative posts and stories while cheering Biden and his policies on. Then Zuckerberg dropped the second shoe. On the Joe Rogan podcast, he admitted his company was under great pressure from the Biden White House to censor certain subjects, particularly as they dealt with COVID. What Zuckerberg and others, like Jeff Bezos, who owns the Washington Post, are finally realizing that their enormously powerful platforms to be steered by the ideological left was an error. On issues like gender ideology, illegal immigration, and COVID-19, not to mention the obsession with delegitimizing Trump and covering up for the corruption and diminished mental capacity of President Joe Biden, Meta and the rest of big tech were out of touch with most Americans. Moreover, their willingness to censor opposing views under the guise of halting the flow of misinformation was not only wrong, It's obviously bad for business in a country where voters just handed unified control of Washington Republicans this past November. I understand some of the ramifications. Shutting down this censorship on Facebook and other venues will allow a lot of hateful things to be posted. But we have to allow speech even if we don't agree with it. But in reality, the real threat to our democracy comes from shutting down speech we don't like. By changing this philosophy, we are dismantling the real disinformation complex that has been the alliance of left-wing partisan activists, government agencies cooperating with them, and corporate America with big tech waging ideological war and conservative ideas, and anyone dissenting from the woke ideologies of the left. It's about time this happened, and welcome back to free speech in the United States. This has been To My Liberal Friends. Thanks for listening. If you enjoy the podcast on YouTube, hit the subscribe button.